Good. Great. So let's start with the name of the company, Physna, short for physical DNA. And that's why we came up where we got this weird name. What does that mean? Physical DNA. It's really the relationship of things. If I were to take my coffee mug here and throw it against the wall and shatter it, Physna would be able to tell me exactly where those shards go to recreate this coffee mug. I could use the shard to find the coffee mug, and I could use the coffee mug to find the shards. It's really understanding how any amount of geometric data can relate to other geometric data. Once you've bridged that gap, you're allowing software to think of three-dimensional data the way that binary code in current software currently understands 2D data, which is what we all work with, right? It's text-based essentially. And the reason that's important is that when you get into different areas of 3D technology, even within AR, but especially when you start crossing the boundary between AR, VR, CAD, 3D printing, 3D scanning, etc., you have silos and sub-silos, and the silos of data don't communicate well. So what's Physna here to do? I mean, our mission as a company, our vision is to create a better world where humans can innovate at the speed of their imagination by bridging the gap, by removing the barrier between what's physical and what's digital. And our mission, our way to do that, is to create a new generation of software through creating a platform. So everything that I'm going to show you, we either already have APIs for or are creating APIs. In other words, so third-party companies can use these types of tools in their own tool stack as part of their own platform, et cetera. We've hired a lot of people from Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, but a lot of them, if you look at look at the people we've hired on LinkedIn, from especially in engineering, you'll notice a trend. There's a lot of people who are leaving FANG type companies with a focus on augmented reality and other types of 3D technology coming to Physna because of how unique this approach is. I want to show you two different products that we have. These are not platforms, these are just products that we built, that core technology. Real briefly, the first one is Thangs, and you can go to thangs.com. When we're done with this, I'll put a couple links here in the chat so you can go to them. Thangs is totally free. There is no paywall anywhere. No matter what you do on Thangs, it's free, even if you have private models and are working with all your friends. Thangs is really meant to be the Google of the metaverse, if you will, the Google of 3D. And it's completely agnostic to the type of file provided. So if you have different types of 3D models, it doesn't matter to Thangs. It can still search amongst them, not just by text, but by geometry. So to give you an example, there we go. Right now we have over 3.4 million models that have been analyzed by Thangs or searchable by Thangs. And that number is going to multiply significantly over the coming months, and certainly over the coming years especially. Thangs doesn't just rely on models that are uploaded, it also crawls the web. That's why using the Google analogy is actually pretty apt, because you can search not only what people happen to have uploaded there, but also all the other sites that have been crawled so far as well. So it's a one-stop shop to find everything else. But beyond that, there are other tools like the ability to collaborate with other users. And what'll matter most to people here is a recent addition to the Thangs, which is the ability to view any model, regardless of how it was created, where it was found, what the initial intent of that model was for, in augmented reality, even without requiring any kind of specialized software. So if you go to thangs.com on your phone, it doesn't matter if you have iOS or Android, and you find a model, here's a little brief little video you'll see playing. You can click on download AR, actually it'll say open an AR. Here's me on my front porch with the UFO that I found. And there you go, you can scare everybody in the Pentagon totally free with a model that was initially designed, I believe, for 3D printing. It wasn't for augmented reality at all. And it's just using your phone's camera to place that model there. A more practical example might be this, here to the right, where I'm showing you a preview of how something would be that you might 3D print or manufacture would fit on another machine. And so we see this a lot of people who are in 3D printing using augmented reality and vice versa. It sort of bridges the gap between different disciplines of 3D and helps create a one unified approach. And excuse me, how do I go to the next slide? There we go. We're also creating a workspace. And so the reason I want to highlight this workspace is that even though it's not released yet, we have it in alpha. There's a few people using it. There's also a beta version you can sign up for. So once beta is released, you'll be invited to that community. If you go to thangs.com, it's at the bottom of the screen, it says join beta, you fill out a really short little form. And what this does is allows you to work with people in other disciplines, in other areas, and other types of software. And you can use X and they can use Y software to collaborate together on a model. And it'll actually highlight, which is what you see here in green, the differences between one version and another. It's automated version control and revision control. And soon coming to that will be an automated intelligence engine that'll help to even predict, what other parts you might need, et cetera, for what you're working on. That's future state, but not far off. We already have it in alpha, as I mentioned. That's Thangs. Physna also has a product that's just called Physna, and we internally call it Physna Enterprise. We know when we're talking about the product versus the company. Really briefly, this is what people pay for. This is how I make money. As was mentioned earlier, we've raised about $86 million to date. 76 million of that was this year, and over the past 8 months or so. And the reason that we've been able to raise that money is because Thangs has been growing faster than any 3D community in history, but also because we do have a way to monetize this technology. And that's through this. So Physna is as I mentioned, all this is available as a platform for developers, but as a SaaS product, we have the ability to search models with pictures. So even if you don't have a LiDAR scanner, we can use a LiDAR scanner to find parts. But if you don't, let's say you just have a picture of something, take a picture. We can find out what that is, not just categorically like Google Images might do, but very specifically, and say that picture that you took is a picture of this part number, which has these duplicates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can go from a picture to understanding not only what something is, but alternatives for it, how you can source it, and then any other data that your database contains, such as how to manufacture it or where it goes. Obviously, we can go from 3D to 3D. That's our core thing, right? So under this 3D relationship database, some people refer to this as shape search. I think of it as a lot deeper than just shape, because it's looking at every single aspect of a model. That's why you see we are extremely precise with the match percentages. Here's a match of, I think this is a wheel fixture with a couple others. You'll see that there's 100% duplicate here, and there are others that have tiny little differences. And I'll show you in a minute that you can actually see what those differences are. We also have classification automation. So this is the simplest version of ML. So when models come in, we immediately classify what they are for these companies. So even though we have different, people might have named them with a number, or maybe they have different names from different countries, they all share the same geometry, which is a universal language. And so this classification helps them to find it naturally, and also for them to understand what kind of thing every part is, not just geometrically, but when they look at it and see the description. We can go a lot further than that, though. I think I went too there. Every part that we see, we analyze compared to data we've seen from other parts. So we don't just compare the geometry, we compare the data about the parts after we compare their geometry. And then we can make predictions like other names for something, categories, how much something should cost, how much, what the pricing of it should be, how it should be manufactured, what the materials should be for it, what the use cases might be, where it might be produced, how it might perform in real life, right? Anything that can be tied to the geometry or from the other metadata that's connected to that geometry can be predicted. And it can be predicted a lot faster than people think. Once you've got this level of 3D data, you can make predictions much, much faster than you ever could with two-dimensional pictures, photos, and text. So it's orders of magnitude faster at predicting things. This is an example of comparisons, right? So with a simple LiDAR scan, we're able to show somebody whether or not a part that they found is in tolerance or not, right? So if you say that the tolerance threshold is 0.5 or 5, let's say it's 5 millimeters or 0.5 millimeters, you can tell just by the coloration here whether or not something is within tolerance. So that's something that used to be extremely difficult to do. You'd have to have someone manually go in and program what the part was, worry about orientation. They'd have to do a lot of manual measurements. And then a lot of the computer input. Now it's 100% automated. So this becomes something that any company can do pretty easily. And honestly, any human can do pretty easily. There are other types of comparison that are a lot simpler than that are model to model. I'll skip that for the sake of time. This is what I think is one of the coolest things about the company, is that we can show you not only that things are related, but how. This picture that you're looking at here is an engine, and I believe this is Spanish here, although I'm pretty bad at my foreign languages that are not German. I think this is Spanish or Portuguese, and you can see that this motor, this engine, has multiple components inside of it. Some of them are not highlighted and some of them are, and why is that? This is saved as a single file. I don't know if it was an STL or what it was, but it's a single isolated file. Here next to this are also isolated individual files and three individual models. What we're doing is we're highlighting exactly where each one of these goes, and you'll see that we're listing them sometimes several times in a row. So we know not only that it's related, but where it's related and how many times it's used in a model. So if you were to upload an engine and say, I want to buy all the components I need for this, you don't have to have an assembly tree. You don't have to have any kind of metadata. It automatically understands geometrically what parts work and what parts don't. What if something's really close though? What if it doesn't fit perfectly? This is my last point. We can show that too. So here's an example of component finder, again, in one solid object. Of course, it can be an assembly. That makes it even easier. But this is an example of one solid object. And you see in the bottom left, here's a part that fits perfectly. All of it's highlighted. And on the bottom right, you see a part that's not all highlighted. And very specifically, one area is not highlighted, and let me explain why. If you were to hover over this in the actual software, you'd see that there are lines that would highlight all the way to the end of this, meaning it does have this spout to the side, but what's not highlighted is the width and the threading. So if I care about the width of the threading, I cannot use the part to the bottom right, but I can use the part to the bottom left. We can search not only what the database that you have currently, but the global database. And that's where Thangs starts to fit in with enterprise, right? So that whether you're a free user or a company, you can search the world and find any part that you want and understand what you're looking at. And once you have that, you're bridging the gap between a two-dimensional world of code and a three-dimensional world of code, where anything that you can program for traditional two-dimensional software can now be programmed for 3D. And this is just a couple examples of what we're able to do with that. And that's it for me, unless anyone has questions.